The Dagger Room Murders Part 2. Chapter 15. The Dagger That Didn't Kill. The manor was silent when Elias returned from the crypt. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that hummed beneath the skin, too complete, too unnatural. Even the clocks had stilled, their pendulums frozen in mid-swing. Rain tapped on the stained glass above the chapel like nails on a coffin lid. He stepped into the grand hall and stopped. Genevieve was waiting. Her face was bloodless. "It's happened again," she whispered. "But they lived." The east wing had been sealed since the third murder, used only for storage and forgotten furniture. But tonight, one of the guest rooms had been broken into. Elias entered the chamber with deliberate slowness, every sense alert. The walls bore no damage. The windows were sealed. The door had been locked from the inside. Yet the bed was soaked in blood. And on the floor, curled, half-conscious, clutching his stomach, was Samuel Ashbrook. Barefoot. Pale. Eyes wide with pain and recognition. He wasn't dead. But a dagger was lodged in his side. The blade had missed the heart by inches. Deliberate? Mistake? Elias crouched beside him as Genevieve pressed a towel to the wound. Samuel gritted his teeth. He didn't want to kill me." "Not yet." "Who?" Elias asked quietly. Samuel's breath was ragged. "He wore a mask. But not like the ball. This one felt old. Wooden. Cracked. It smelled like rot," he said. He shivered violently. He said, "You'll live to hear it open." "Hear what open?" "The door." Samuel's eyes flicked to Elias. "The one below." "Did he say anything else?" Samuel hesitated. "Then he called me filler. Said I wasn't true blood." "You're not?" Genevieve stiffened. Samuel closed his eyes. "Mother was adopted. The Ashbrook name was a gift." Elias rose slowly. "The killer is thinning the line." He examined the dagger next. Same make. Same design. But unlike the others, the blade was blunted. And inside the hilt, hidden beneath the screw-in cap, was a tiny scroll of paper. Elias unfolded it. "A circle must have no interruptions. Your line is broken. You do not belong. You were never meant to carry memory. Do not interfere again." Elias turned the scroll over. Etched in dark red ink, not handwriting, but a glyph. 3 spirals coiled around a single thorn. He recognized it. The mark of Elias Ashbrook, the original oath breaker. Back in the drawing room, Elias laid out all 5 recovered daggers on black velvet. Each was unique. Each had carried a message, etched in metal, sewn into flesh, whispered from the dead. But the 5th was the first to spare a life. He stared at them in silence, then flipped through the blood oath journal once more. Near the back, between the splattered final entries, something caught his eye. Pressed flat, barely legible, was a torn scrap of parchment. "Memory cannot be buried. It can only be reordered." And below it, in unfamiliar writing, "The survivor always knows the missing name. Elias returned to Samuel's bedside at midnight." The young man stirred. "Samuel," Elias said softly, "do you know who Alaric Rowan Ashbrook is?" Samuel blinked. "I've heard that name." "From who?" Samuel hesitated. Then, "I saw it once. Carved on the back of a painting. One we were told never to look at." Elias leaned closer. "Where?" "The attic. Behind the false wall. It's chained shut." Chapter 16. A Code in the Ashes. The attic of Ashbrook Manor was not marked on the modern blueprints. It was the place after places, a crawl space between history and rot, where broken heirlooms went to die, and secrets were stacked like coffins behind dust-shrouded drapes. Elias Vane climbed the narrow staircase alone, oil lamp in one hand, the fifth dagger sheathed beneath his coat. The steps groaned with every movement, as though protesting his presence. At the top, he found a warped door with 3 rusted chains across it, each locked with a different keyhole. He ran his fingers over the wood. Painted over. But beneath the layers of black lacquer, a word had been scratched deep into the grain. Remember. Genevieve arrived moments later, breathless. You shouldn't be up here alone, she said. I'm not, Elias replied. The past is keeping me company. He handed her the oil lamp and drew out the fifth dagger. The hilt contained a thin iron key, hidden beneath the scroll. It fit the smallest of the locks. The other 2? Genevieve reached into her sleeve and revealed a silver chain. My grandfather's key, she said. He said it was to stay hidden until the house bled. Together, they unlocked the door. The attic beyond was vast and bitter cold. The air smelled of ash, linseed oil, and something sour, old varnish turned bad. The floor was a quilt of rotting rugs and warped floorboards. Cobwebs strung from rafter to rafter like ghost veins. But most unnerving were the paintings. Dozens of them. Propped against walls, stacked against furniture, hung crookedly from beams. And all of them, burned. Edges blackened. Faces half melted. Eyes erased. The fire hadn't consumed them entirely, just enough to distort, to mutilate, to conceal. Elias moved slowly through them, examining each one. One portrait, of a boy with storm-colored eyes, had, unfit, carved into the frame. Another, depicting a woman in widow's black, had been stabbed through the canvas with what looked like a hairpin. But then he saw it. A large canvas, face down, chained to the wall. The chain was newer. Oiled. Deliberate. He and Genevieve lifted it carefully, turning it upright. It was a family portrait, painted in 1990. Sebastian Ashbrook. Adeline Rowan. And a boy in the center, aged 9 or 10. His eyes were familiar. Elias stepped closer. At the bottom corner of the frame, carved deep with something sharp, was a name. Alaric Rowan Ashbrook. And behind the frame, taped to the wood, was a sealed envelope. Elias opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter and a page of coded numbers. He read aloud. _ To the one who finds this. If you are reading this, the ritual is active again. Someone has decided to finish what we refused. The crimson lantern was never meant to burn again. The door beneath the chapel is not a tomb. It is a mirror. And behind it waits the truth of our blood, that memory is not inherited, it is engineered. Find the 8th room. Burn the glyphs. Break the circle. Or we all become ghosts of memory. ARA. Beneath the letter, the coded page revealed 7 lines of numbers. 7 to 13 9 to 22 3. 1 to 19 8 to 2 18. 15 to 15 18 to 11 5. 5 to 18 19 to 15 14. 23 to 1 20 to 3 8. 20 to 8 5. 13 to 9 18 to 18 15 to 18. Genevieve whispered. It's a substitution cipher. Elias nodded. A message encoded through numbers. They worked quickly. Replacing each number with its corresponding letter in the alphabet, A equals 1, B equals 2, etc., they decoded the message. Give back the mirror. The prison watches. Then, from the far corner of the attic, a sound. Soft. Dragging. Not footsteps. Something being pulled. Genevieve raised the lamp. The light caught the glint of an iron chain slipping slowly through the rafters, and a handprint smeared on the wall in soot. Fresh. Still warm. Chapter 17, The 7th Room. No one had spoken in 5 minutes. Elias Vane and Genevieve Ashbrook stood outside the chapel once more, the decoded letter from Alaric still clutched in Elias's gloved hand. Beneath their feet, the crypt still pulsed with the rhythm of the crimson lantern's slow, dying heartbeat. But above them, something had shifted. It was Genevieve who broke the silence. 7 beds, but the blueprints say 8. Elias nodded. 7 heirs. 1 sacrifice. She blinked. You think the 8th room wasn't for the Ashbrooks? No, he replied. It was for what they summoned. They returned to the crypt, descending once more into the cold, blood-scented dark. This time, Elias carried 2 of the daggers. One he had recovered. One he had taken from the painting's frame, hidden beneath a layer of burned canvas. Both hummed faintly when brought near the lantern's red glow. Elias knelt beside the cracked circle on the floor, the one with the thorn crown motif split into 7 sections. But now, with the cipher solved, he could see something beneath the symbol. A fine layer of dust covered the stone. He brushed it away. What had once looked like a circle was in fact an iris, a stone ring segmented like the aperture of a camera. And in the center, a keyhole. Elias reached into his coat and removed the tiny brass key hidden in the 5th dagger's hilt. It fit perfectly. The floor gave a click, followed by a grinding sound, deep and ancient. A section of stone rotated inward, revealing a narrow, square-cut stairwell leading straight down. The light from the crimson lantern did not reach it. Only darkness waited. They descended in silence. The air changed the moment they passed through the stone threshold. It was thicker somehow, wetter. Heavy with the scent of copper, wax, and something vaguely floral, like lilies steeped in iron. The stairs ended in a chamber of obsidian walls, faintly reflective. The temperature dropped instantly. There were no torches, no flames. Only reflected candlelight from the world above, but warped. Stretched across the walls in fragmented, moving shapes. Genevieve stepped forward, breath frosting in the air. This isn't just underground. No, Elias said. This is memory, sealed in stone. There was a pedestal in the center. Upon it sat a mirror, about the size of a dinner plate, ringed in gold. Its surface was fractured, webbed with 7 cracks that shimmered faintly as they moved. And at its base, engraved in the stone, for the one who watched. Genevieve backed away. Isadora. Elias stared at the mirror. In its reflection, he did not see himself. He saw a room. Circular. Lit by crimson lanterns. 7 hooded figures kneeling. A boy screaming. The reflection shifted. Now a body, eyes sewn shut. Then again. Alaric, standing where Elias stood now, holding a dagger to his own chest. Stop watching, Alaric's reflection whispered. Start remembering. Then, blackness. Elias stepped back, breath shaking. This room, it stores the memories the family tried to erase. Genevieve whispered. The 7th room, the 8th room, it was never a room at all. It was a vessel. The mirror pulsed once. Then cracked further, a sliver falling and shattering on the floor. The dagger at Elias's side hummed. Suddenly, a sound. Behind them. Footsteps. Not hesitant. Not unsure. Marching. They turned as a figure appeared at the threshold. Tall. Cloaked. A white wooden mask covering their face, cracked at the jaw, eyes dark and hollow. They said nothing. But they carried the 6th dagger. And they raised it in silent challenge. Chapter 18. The Mask of Thorns. The masked figure stood at the threshold of the 8th room. Unmoving. Cloaked in black, gloved hands folded calmly around the 6th dagger, its hilt carved from bone and inlaid with a thorned silver crown. The mask, white wood, painted with hairline cracks, resembled a face split down the middle by grief and time. Elias Vane stepped forward, placing himself between the figure and Genevieve, who clutched the blood oath journal like a ward. The air had grown impossibly cold. The mirror at the chamber's center pulsed again, each flicker releasing a soft whisper, like breath caught in stone. "Who are you?" Elias demanded. His voice echoed too loudly. The figure did not speak. Instead, they bowed. Slow. Ritualistic. Not in mockery, but in recognition. "You know me," they said at last. Their voice was neither old nor young. Neither masculine nor feminine. Just calm. Too calm. "I am the memory that would not be buried." Elias narrowed his eyes. "You're Alaric." The figure tilted their head. "I was. Once." Before the order decided forgetting was cleaner than forgiveness. Genevieve stepped forward, voice trembling. "You killed them." One by one. The mask turned toward her. "No. I corrected them." One by one. They reached into their cloak and withdrew a scroll, bound in wax, stamped with the Ashbrook seal, and ripped in half. "This was my invitation to the circle." They sent it in secret. Then revoked it publicly. They erased me, but left me watching. Elias kept his voice steady. "The dagger in Samuel's chest, why didn't you kill him?" The mask dipped slightly. "He is like me." A name borrowed. A role never offered. "I spared him because he carries the fracture." Elias's gaze narrowed. "And what about this room?" The masked figure stepped closer to the mirror, just enough for the red glow to catch the carved pattern on the masked surface, a crown of thorns encircling a cracked eye. "This room is the wound. It bleeds what they tried to cauterize. And tonight, I seal it." They raised the sixth dagger, not toward Elias, but toward the mirror. Crack. The blade struck the surface once. The mirror shuddered, its image fracturing into 1,000 bleeding shards. A sound filled the chamber, not a scream, but a chord of memory. Laughter, crying, shouting, the clash of steel, the crack of bone, all layered, all echoing. Genevieve fell to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. Elias stood his ground. "If you destroy that mirror, what happens?" The masked figure looked to him. "It stops remembering. And we stop reliving what we refuse to confront. You'll kill the truth." "No. I'll free it." The masked figure placed the sixth dagger gently at the mirror's base. Then removed the mask. Genevieve gasped. Even Elias took a step back. It was Alaric Rowan Ashbrook, but not as the boy from the painting. This man was in his 40s now. His face bore scars, one jagged line across his brow, another curling down his jaw. His hair was streaked with silver. His eyes, storm gray, were the only unchanged thing. And they burned with a kind of certainty that made Elias's spine tense. "They broke me to protect their name," Alaric said softly. "Now I break their legacy to protect the world from what they buried." He turned to the mirror again. The reflection now showed all 7 daggers, arranged in a circle around a ritual sigil. In the center, Isadora. Her face twisted into a smile so wide it split. Her eyes, black, reflective, turned toward Elias. Then she spoke. "Finish it, child. Seal the pact in blood. One dagger left. One memory left. Let me out." Elias stepped forward. "She's not sealed." "She's still here." Alaric nodded. "She watches. She remembers. But soon she'll possess." He turned to Elias. "You can help me, Vane." One last dagger. One last death. We bury her together. Or we all become Ashbrooks. Chapter 19, The Door with No Handle. Ashbrook Manor was no longer silent. It breathed. The walls expanded and contracted in subtle shifts. The candles flickered against windless air. Portraits watched with eyes that remembered more than they ever witnessed in life. The house had awoken, not as home, but as host. After Alaric vanished into the mirror light, Elias stood motionless in the 8th room, staring at the fractured glass, the 6 daggers, the echo of Isidora's smile lingering in the cracks. Behind him, Genevieve whispered, "What if sealing it isn't the answer?" Elias turned to her slowly. "Then everything we've done, every body, every warning, every murder, was just a rehearsal." Hours passed. Rain fell again, this time heavier, angrier. It hit the chapel roof like fingernails. Somewhere in the manor, a clock struck 13. The final page of the Blood Oath journal still held something Elias hadn't seen before. Beneath the scrawl, visible only when held directly above a flame, a line shimmered into view. "The door does not open with keys. It opens with memory, and its absence." The west wing had long been sealed. Its rooms were gutted by fire during what the Ashbrooks called the Second Scourging, a polite euphemism for a century-old madness that left 3 heirs dead and a ballroom blackened with soot. But Elias had seen the floor plans. Behind the remains of Room 217, which had no windows, no known entrance, and no record of furnishing, was a wall thicker than it should be. He brought Genevieve and 2 of the recovered daggers with him. The air grew heavy as they neared. Elias pushed aside scorched drapery and found the wall, smooth plaster, unmarked, untouched for decades. He ran his gloved hands over it. At first, nothing. Then a pulse. A shiver, subtle as breath against skin. He pressed his palm flat. The wall felt warm. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the door." "There's no handle," Genevieve said. "Because it's not meant to open by force." Elias stepped back and removed his coat. Then he drew a thin blade, the 3rd dagger, and held it to his palm. Without flinching, he sliced just deep enough for blood to gather. He pressed his bloodied hand against the wall and whispered the only name not written in the journal. "Isidora." The wall shuddered. Cracks veined across the plaster like lightning. The air filled with a sound, not a groan, but a drawn breath. And then, the wall slid inward. Behind it, a narrow, hexagonal chamber lit by no flame. And yet, it glowed. They stepped inside. The floor was stone, blackened with soot but veined in gold leaf, forming the outline of the thorn crown surrounded by 7 arrows pointed inward. At the center, floating above the ground, was a wooden cradle. Inside, a withered book, bound in skin that wasn't leather. Elias stepped closer. Genevieve whispered, "What is that?" "It's the original oath," Elias said softly. "Before the blood journal. Before the daggers. This is where the first lie was made holy." He opened the book. The pages were empty. Until he blinked. Then words formed, in his own handwriting. Underscore. "You remember now. You are not outside the circle, Elias. You are the final memory. Underscore." Genevieve screamed. Elias spun around. She had collapsed. Blood streamed from her nose, her eyes wide and locked on the far wall, where a portrait had emerged from the plaster itself. It was her. But older. Paler. Mouth sewn shut. And in her reflection, the cradle was empty. The walls pulsed again. The chamber began to tremble. And from deep below, where the crimson lantern had flickered last, came a sound like chains being lifted. Elias took Genevieve's hand. "We have to end it now. Before the door closes again." Chapter 20. The One Who Watches. The door behind them had vanished. Not closed, vanished, as if the manor itself had inhaled and erased its own secret. Elias Vane stood in the center of the hidden chamber, Genevieve still limp against his side, her blood smearing the golden veins carved into the floor. The cradle was gone. The floating book had vanished. And in its place, at the far wall, a mirror had bled into existence, tall, warped, its frame shaped like twisted roots woven into the form of a crown. The glass inside was black. Not like obsidian. Like void. Then it blinked. The mirror blinked. Not an illusion. Not a trick of light. A single eye, carved from reflection and shadow, opened in the surface. It didn't shimmer. It didn't glow. It stared. A voice, low, layered, neither male nor female, spoke from within. I watched you bleed the line. I watched you follow his path. I watched you remember what should have been sealed. Elias stepped forward, every instinct screaming, run. But he had learned to listen to instinct, and then do the opposite. Isadora. The voice softened, a mother's whisper laced with smoke. Child of memory. You carry what he could not. The circle was broken because one refused. Now it completes with you. Elias held up his hand, still stained with blood. I'm not part of the circle. You are. By remembering. The moment you read Giles' journal, the circle marked you. Behind him, Genevieve stirred. She sat up slowly, her face pale, her voice a whisper. Elias, your name was in the first journal. It was the name of the oath breaker, he said. No. It was a warning. You are him. He turned to her sharply. But the mirror confirmed it. The blood you carry is older than your name. Elias Ashbrook never died. He lived again. In every generation. Watching. Questioning. Until one day, he returned to finish what he refused. Elias felt the floor shift beneath him. Not literally. Spiritually. I was never meant to solve this mystery, he whispered. I am the mystery. The eye blinked again. Then widened. The mirror began to pull at the room, not with force, but with grief. Portraits melted. Candles died. Genevieve screamed again as the air pressed in on her. The voice sharpened. There is one dagger left. Bring it to me. Complete the circle. Or the manor will burn with memory unburied. A final dagger. The seventh. Elias turned to Genevieve. Where is it? Her breath hitched. The mausoleum. They buried it with father. Said he never wanted to remember again. Elias closed his eyes. Then that's where we end it. As they fled the chamber, the mirror cracked, just once. And a single word echoed after them as they passed into the hall above. Remember. Chapter 21. The House Remembers. Ashbrook Manor had never felt like home. But now, it didn't feel like a house at all. Elias Vane and Genevieve Ashbrook emerged from the secret chamber beneath the west wing into what should have been the hallway, but the walls had moved. The portraits were gone. The wallpaper had peeled in spiral patterns. The candelabras had burned to stubs and melted downward, not from heat, but gravity forgotten. And every door they passed was ajar. Behind each, something different. In one, a nursery, untouched by time, music playing on a gramophone, but no record spun. In another, an empty ballroom where shadows danced, tall and twisting, though no light cast them. Genevieve clung to Elias's arm. The house, it's remembering itself. Elias nodded, voice low. And it's trying to make us part of it. They turned the corner toward the grand staircase, only to find it replaced by a library. Not just any library. The family archive, lost in the fire of 1938. But now, reconstructed perfectly. Genevieve gasped. This shouldn't exist. It doesn't, Elias whispered. Unless the house pulled it forward. From memory. They passed between towering shelves where pages turned on their own. Candles lit themselves. Books whispered names Elias hadn't heard since the journal. Cornelius. Beatrice. Isadora. Elias. The last voice sounded like his own. He reached out, and a book bit him. A flash of pain. A drop of blood. The shelf moved. Not physically, spiritually. The rose shifted into a spiral. A path. Genevieve grabbed his sleeve. Don't follow it. I have to. It's showing me the way out. Or it's showing you the way in. They emerged not at the staircase, but at the front hall, now warped by memory. The grandfather clock, long broken, ticked in reverse. The black and white tiles on the floor had rearranged into a sigil, the same one found beneath the crimson lantern. Outside, through the stained glass windows, the night had deepened. Time, it seemed, was looping. We don't have long, Elias said. The house is collapsing into itself. Genevieve stared toward the eastern colonnade. The mausoleum is in the garden. We go through the chapel. She hesitated. That's where she watches. Then let her see us. They crossed the chapel in silence. The crimson lantern still flickered beneath the altar, its red glow brighter than ever. Shadows of the seven flickered along the pews, hooded figures reenacting the original oath in slow, silent gestures. Genevieve whispered, Do you see them? Elias nodded. They're not ghosts. What are they? Memory rehearsing itself. Outside, the garden was wild. The hedges had grown unnaturally tall, curling inward. The rose bushes had bloomed black. And at the center stood the Ashbrook mausoleum, pale stone veined with moss and inscriptions in Latin and Old English. Its iron door stood ajar. Waiting. Inside, it was cold. 7 tombs lined the circular chamber, each sealed with a metal plate bearing a name and a sigil. In the center, atop a raised pedestal, Sebastian Ashbrook, father to Alaric, keeper of the final dagger. The slab over his tomb bore an engraving that hadn't been there before. Underscore. To remember is to awaken. To awaken is to bleed. The circle breaks in silence, or it binds in song. Underscore. Genevieve knelt beside the tomb, brushing dust from the seal. Elias placed a hand on the stone. It opened. No lock. No hinge. Just yielded to him. Inside, wrapped in rotting velvet, was a dagger unlike the others. Shorter. Etched with music notes down the blade. A song. The song of the oath. The final dagger. The 7th. Elias turned to Genevieve. We have one chance to end it. The house is collapsing inward, pulling every unburied secret with it. She whispered, Then we end it in the place it began. The 8th room? No, Elias said. The chapel. The altar. Beneath the lantern. Chapter 22, The Dagger's First Wound. The chapel was no longer just a place of worship. It had become a wound in time. When Elias Vane and Genevieve Ashbrook returned through its ancient doors, they found the altar glowing from beneath, as if the crimson lantern below pulsed with the final heartbeat of a dying god. The pews had rearranged themselves into a spiral, circling inward. And in every seat, shadows sat. Hooded. Watching. Not people. Not ghosts. Memory made flesh. Elias carried the 7th dagger in both hands, its hilt warm, almost humming. The musical notes etched into the blade vibrated faintly, as if a melody only he could hear whispered along the steel. They're waiting, Genevieve said. For what? Elias asked. For you to do what they couldn't. He stepped onto the altar. The 7 recovered daggers had already been placed in a circle around the cracked stone platform. Each blade pointed inward, like the hands of a clock converging at midnight. As Elias knelt to place the final dagger, the crimson lantern flared brighter, casting red light that stretched across the chapel, igniting the stained glass windows with blood-hued fire. The shadows in the pews rose. They began to chant, though no mouths moved. The 7 stood. The 7 fell. Memory sealed. Memory swelled. In blood we bind, in name we bleed. The circle calls the final seed. Elias whispered to Genevieve, "If I complete the circle, something comes through. Then don't. But if I don't, it still comes." From beneath the altar, the floor began to crack. The sigil that once lay dormant now blazed red-hot, 7 daggers pulsing with the glow of awakened memory. The mirror in the 8th room, far below, began to hum with matching resonance. Its cracks spread like veins across the walls of the manor. And then she appeared. Not as a ghost. Not as a memory. But as a woman. Isadora Ashbrook. Dressed in mourning black. Eyes like obsidian glass. Her skin white as candle wax. Lips sewn shut, until they unstitched themselves with invisible thread. "The circle broke," she said, voice echoing from everywhere at once. "You are the wound. You are the cure." Elias raised his dagger. "You were meant to stay sealed. I was meant to remember. But they buried me alive. In ink. In silence. Now you carry all of them inside you. You are not the detective, Elias. You are the echo." Genevieve reached forward, but Isadora held her still with a single raised hand. "Only he may finish this." Elias stepped forward into the center of the circle. Each of the 6 daggers already glowed. The 7th thrummed with energy. He raised it over the center of the altar. Isadora's eyes flashed. "Name the final memory." Elias hesitated. Then, Alaric Rowan Ashbrook. The dagger flared white-hot. The altar began to split. "Now bleed it," she whispered. "Seal the circle." Elias stared at the blade. He could feel it. The draw. The weight. The legacy. If he cut himself, if he bled willingly, the circle would be complete. And the memory would stop repeating. But the truth was now clear. The circle wasn't meant to bind. It was meant to feed. Isadora stepped closer. "Do it." Elias looked to Genevieve. Her eyes glassy. Afraid. "What happens if I don't?" he asked. Isadora's mouth twitched. "Then the house remembers forever. Every death. Every wound. Every betrayal. Again and again. You become the next shadow. The next watcher." Elias looked down at the blade. Then smiled. "Then let the house remember." He raised the dagger. And drove it not into his hand, but into the altar. The stone shattered. The crimson lantern burst like glass under pressure, red flame erupting upward through the spiral. The pews ignited. The shadows screamed. And Isadora's face twisted, not in pain, but rage. "You broke it!" Elias met her gaze. "I refused. Just like the first Elias. I didn't come here to finish the circle. I came to end it." The chapel began to collapse. The stained glass windows shattered inward. The 7 daggers fell to the floor and burned like paper. Genevieve grabbed his hand. "We run." "No," Elias whispered. "We walk. Let the house watch us leave." Chapter 23: The Society Within. Morning came to Ashbrook Manor not with birdsong, but with ash. The sun rose behind a sky as pale as paper, and its light poured over shattered windows, burned stairwells, and a chapel now cracked in half, stones spilled like bone dust across the lawn. And yet, the manor stood. It should have collapsed, but it hadn't. It endured. Because Ashbrooks don't fall. They fracture. Elias Vane stood at the chapel's threshold, suit streaked with soot, his right hand bandaged from where a shard of altar stone had sliced him. Genevieve stood beside him, silent, her face unreadable. They were the only two survivors who had stood within the circle when it broke. The others, the staff, the guests, the heirs who hadn't fled, had been drawn into the chapel by the screams, the fire, the collapse. And then, silence. 7 bodies. 7 empty pews. But not all the guests had died. Later that day, in what remained of the manor's east wing, Elias lit a fire in the drawing-room hearth. He placed 6 objects on the mantel. A torn photograph. A brass key. A rose carved from bone. A mirror shard. A blood-stained glove. A single white lily tipped in crimson. Genevieve placed a 7th item beside them. The ashes of the blood oath journal. "Are you sure no pages survived?" Elias asked. "No pages. Just memory. And we're not going to write any of it down." She looked him in the eye. "Would you?" He didn't answer. Mr. Farrow returned that evening. He had fled during the 5th murder, and Elias had assumed him lost. But the old butler entered the manor like a man returning to his grave. His eyes were hollow. His voice thin. "The circle is broken," he said. "But the society is not." Elias frowned. "There's more?" Farrow nodded. "Always." The bleeding thorn was never just Ashbrook. It began with 7 families. Each with a dagger. Each with a watcher. Then there are others. Yes. But not all want resurrection. Some simply observe. Genevieve stepped forward. "Will they come for us?" "Not yet," Farrow said. "They're listening. They're remembering." "And if we tell the world?" Elias asked. "Then you become memory too." That night, Elias stood alone at the edge of the estate grounds. He stared at the Ashbrook crest etched into the front gate, a crown surrounded by thorns, its center empty. The symbol now looked wrong. Incomplete. He lit a match, held it to the last remaining dagger, the one he had hidden from Genevieve, and watched as the blade refused to catch. "You're not done," he muttered. "Not destroyed. Just sleeping." He dropped it into the estate well and turned away. As he and Genevieve drove from the manor, the trees whispered with the wind, and the road seemed longer than it should have been. Neither spoke. Until, finally, Genevieve asked, "Do you believe in closure?" Elias glanced in the mirror. Behind them, Ashbrook Manor still stood. Smaller now. Almost watching. "No," he said. "I believe in interruption." Chapter 24. The Final Blade. 1 month later. The fog in London had teeth. It crawled low along the cobbled streets and clung to Elias Vane's overcoat like a memory that refused to die. In the reflection of the cafe window, he looked older than he remembered, eyes sharper, jaw tighter, hair a touch grayer at the temples. He stirred his tea once. Twice. Didn't drink it. He never did. Across from him, a folded newspaper carried the headline, "Ashbrook Fire Ruled Natural, No Survivors Identified." Below it, a photo of the ruined chapel. Just a shell now. A stone throat that had screamed out memory, and swallowed it whole. But Elias knew better. They had survived. They had walked away. And now, the invitation had arrived. It had come to his London flat 2 nights prior, no address, no postage, slipped under the door like a threat written in silence. An envelope of ivory vellum, sealed in black wax, stamped not with a crest, but a symbol. A crown of thorns, encircling an hourglass. Inside, a single line. One circle ends. Another begins. And below that, coordinates. Genevieve met him in Battersea Park, beneath the iron arches of an old greenhouse now long abandoned. She wore black, as always, but now carried herself with quiet command, the air of someone who had looked into the abyss, and hadn't flinched. "You got one too?" she asked. Elias handed her the envelope. Same seal? She nodded. Thorns. Hourglass. The society within. You think they want revenge? No, Genevieve said. They want to offer a chair. Elias didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his coat and withdrew something he hadn't touched in weeks. The 8th dagger. The one no one spoke of. Not part of the ritual. Not part of the oath. The one Alaric forged himself. Its blade bore no name. Only a phrase carved in near-invisible script. A blade that breaks memory, or seals it forever. He looked at Genevieve. They want us to choose. To join? She asked. Or to watch. Like Isadora. Like Alaric. Like all the ones who came before. You said you believed in interruption. She reminded him. I still do, Elias said. He stared at the dagger. Then turned, walked to the edge of the greenhouse, and placed it into the roots of the dead ivy vines, burying it in the soil with his bare hand. Then let the next circle form without a blade. Back at his flat, a second envelope waited. Same wax. Different message. _ We saw what you did. We approve. But memory does not stay buried. Bring nothing. We will give you the next name. _ Elias stood in the doorway for a long time, the letter shaking just slightly in his hand. He folded it neatly, slid it into his pocket, and turned off the lights. Chapter 25. The dagger room closes. It was raining on Thistle Row. Not the kind of rain that sweeps in to wash the city clean, but the kind that whispers through the eaves, seeps beneath cobblestone cracks, and remembers where the bodies were buried. Elias Vane arrived at number 17, an address that didn't exist on any modern registry. The building was narrow, 3 stories of soot-stained brick with ivy curled across its face like veins on aging hands. There was no nameplate. Only a black door. And etched into the door's brass knocker, faint but unmistakable. A crown of thorns curled around a single mirror shard. He knocked once. The door opened immediately. No one stood there. Just silence, and a narrow hallway bathed in amber light. Elias stepped inside. The door closed behind him without sound. The hallway was lined with portraits, not of nobles or family trees, but of watchers. Figures in black. Each face slightly blurred, their names burned away or smeared with ink. At the end of the hall, a table. Upon it, a tea set untouched. And a letter unsealed. Elias sat. Poured nothing. Opened the note. We do not invite lightly. But some doors must close from within. Beneath it, a list of names. Old. Crossed out. At the bottom. Vane, Elias, unresolved. He stared at it for a long moment. You want me to take her place? He murmured. A voice from the shadows behind him answered. Not her place. Your own. He turned. In the corner of the room, behind sheer curtains and dusted bookshelves, stood Alaric. Older. Still cloaked. But no longer masked. Isadora isn't gone, Alaric said. You know that. Elias nodded. She watches from the cracks now. And the cracks are spreading, Alaric said softly. Because the world doesn't forget. It just waits. He held out a book. Small. Bound in black leather. Blank. Write it, he said. Why? Elias asked. Because if you don't, someone else will. And they won't tell the truth. They'll turn it into a story. A myth. And myths invite repetition. Elias took the book. Opened to the first page. Paused. Then, slowly, began to write. Ashbrook Manor stood in silence. Not because it was empty, but because it had finished speaking. He closed the book, set it on the table. I've said enough? Alaric gave a slight nod. The room darkened. Not with shadow, but with finality. The portraits dimmed. The voices stilled. A candle extinguished itself. And beneath Elias's chair, carved into the floorboards, a phrase slowly appeared. Some rooms were never meant to open twice. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted just enough to let through one sliver of moonlight. Elias stepped into the night. Coat buttoned. Gloves on. The black door at number 17 closed behind him. And when he turned to look again, there was no door at all. The Dagger Room Murders. Case closed. Circle broken. Memory kept. Bonus epilogue, the name on the wall. Somewhere in London, weeks later. A woman in a pressed gray coat and soft leather gloves walks briskly down a corridor lit by flickering wall sconces. The wallpaper is navy blue velvet. The smell is paper, wax, and time. She stops at a brass-plated door. Knocks once. A man answers. Elderly. Sharp eyes. Tailored vest. The keeper of records. You said it couldn't be reopened, the woman says. I did. Then explain this. She hands him a photograph, black and white, printed from an old surveillance camera in the London Underground. In the image, a tall man in a long coat, face in shadow, pausing at a turnstile. But the silhouette is unmistakable. Elias Vane. The man behind the desk frowns. He was listed as unresolved. He's not anymore. Then it begins again. The camera pans slowly across the office, revealing a massive wall etched with names. Some are glowing faintly. Others have burned out entirely. The camera pauses. Focuses. A new name is fading back into the wall, glowing softly in red ink. Vane, Elias, returned. Just before the screen fades to black, the lights flicker once. A typewriter behind the desk begins to tap, all on its own. It writes only 3 words. He remembers now.
The case may be closed for now, but mysteries always leave behind new questions. If you enjoyed this investigation, leave a like. Every clue you find keeps the trail alive. Share your theories in the comments. Your mind might be sharper than you think. And subscribe to our channel Detective Mystery Stories, where every case hides a deeper secret, and every secret deserves to be uncovered. The next mystery is already waiting for you.